What is up guys, it is Smowtown here, and today I wanted to talk about an aspect of the lore that has really interested me recently, and that is the new narrative surrounding the Lotus's conversion at the hands of the Orokin. Let's go back to the Sacrifice quest in 2018 quickly though. Back then I made a forum post and then a video, both of which are linked below, where I defended the Lotus's actions, as there was a large following of people who believed that she had been deceiving us all along after the release of the Apostasy prologue, and the fact that the Lotus was a ruse so the Sentients could use us to clear out the origin system, i.e. against the Grineer and the Corpus, in preparation for a new sentient invasion. Since the release of the new war content, as I predicted, this has proven to be false, and the Lotus was in fact a personality, and not a ruse perpetrated by the Sentients. However, what we have now learned, apparently according to Erra, is that the Lotus was a personality, but she was created by the Orokin, after Nata was captured and reprogrammed by the creators. I find this new narrative to be a very convenient one for the resurgent Erra and the Sentients. I find Erra to be a very underhanded and malevolent individual, and I will explain why I think he is possibly lying, and why the original narrative could still be true, i.e. that the Lotus did stay her hand on purpose because she did genuinely have maternal feelings for the Tenno. I think that there's enough established lore on the collapse and the Tenno betrayal that this new narrative doesn't particularly fit that well. This isn't a new area of the lore that's never really been explored. There's an established story here that doesn't mesh well with this new narrative. The Nata quest is such an often forgotten quest, but it gives us witness accounts from HUNHOW, the leader of the Sentients, of what actually happened back then, and it does slightly conflict with what we hear here. If DE does later clarify and make it clear that the Lotus was actually created by the Orokin, and we get that established in the lore, and it isn't just a narrative perpetrated by Erra, then I feel it will actually have been a retcon with the Nata quest, or at least, at the very best, it will fit very uncomfortably and unsatisfyingly against it. I don't believe DE will do this, as I know they are capable of giving us unreliable narrators, etc., and this is the kind of way I'll look at the story, given that it's perpetrated by Erra, until we hear otherwise. I think Erra is deceptive and a liar, and I will now show you why. So during the Ropeless mission on Jupiter, this is where we kind of get the main explanation of where Nata's at, what she believes now, and what we're supposed to believe the story is. She engages in dialogue with us, mainly reminiscing about our collective journey and relationship up to this point. She tells us what we had already believed, that Nata was meant to infiltrate the Tenno as a mimic, destroy the Orokin, and then destroy the Tenno. But then she felt a weakness, a love or affection for the Tenno, and instead of destroying them, she became their mother and sequestered them away in the void to protect them. However, she now reveals a new narrative, one that is perpetrated by her family, that being Erra, that this original story was in fact a lie, that she and us were both lied to, and instead she was reprogrammed by the Orokin to be used as a weapon against the Sentients, and that's where her love or mentorship to us began, is because in fact she was programmed to do so, rather than it being a natural development of her own personality. This is what Erra tells her back on Lua when they come face to face during the Old War, and it is likewise what Nata believes now, and it seems she is grateful to her family for saving her from the original lie. However, I don't accept this at face value. As I mentioned, this truth is very convenient for Erra, as it creates a reason for Nata to shed any loyalty that she has for us, any confusion as to where her loyalty may lie, as she now believes any feelings that she had for us, any relationship between us, was in fact manufactured by her enemies, the creators. So let's go through my reasoning step by step as to why I don't necessarily believe Erra's narrative, but before we start, let me just say that it could be the fact that it is true and I'm just looking too far into it. However, I do at this point think there's enough inconsistencies that we can at least call it into question. So my first point, and kind of one of the main points as to why I made this video and started looking into it, was because I think Erra is an unreliable source. So let's get this out of the way. I respected HUNHOW. He was a straightforward aggressor who was saddened by his daughter's betrayal but still loved her and wanted her to return to his side, and then directly tried to attack us upon awakening by using the Stalker to take out our place of operations, i.e. the Lua base. Erra, on the other hand, I really despise him, and I cannot wait to, get in there and destroy him. To me, he gives off really manipulative, underhanded vibes. He's not like his father, who was quite straightforward in his aggression. Erra seems to pretend to be really sympathetic to his sister, whereas in fact, I think he is just manipulating her for his own gains. In the Old War cinematic, we see Erra and the Lotus meet during the Siege of Lua, where he expresses pain over his sister becoming the Lotus, stating that it was the Orokin who are making her this way, and making her kill her people, i.e. the sentients. I get the impression that this is what Erra wants to believe at this point, as he couldn't conceive of Nata turning her back on the sentients willingly. Is it possible that this narrative is what Erra needs to believe because he can't accept anything else? Or because he's trying to manipulate her by making her feel doubt about her feelings? In the second unnamed video of the New War, we see Erra's true colours, in my opinion. As usual, he appears to be patient with Nata's confusion, showing some brotherly concern over the way she feels. Yet as she starts asking more and more questions about the creators who changed her, she eventually realises that Ballas is in fact one of these creators and points to him, and asks Erra if Ballas is one. At that point, before the conversation can be continued anymore or we can hear from Ballas, Erra seems to lose his patience and throws her into a device or pedestal that stuns her and starts drawing an energy from her, and it ends any type of conversation. So why does he do this suddenly after showing all this quote-unquote patience towards his sister? I think there are two clear reasons. The first being is that he's simply lost his patience with his sister's confused questions and drops any pretense of familial love and just wants to get on with his plan, which is, of course, the destruction of the Origin System peoples. Or number two, that he's concerned about this line of questioning and that Ballas may let something slip that disproves Erra's claim that the Orokin in fact reprogrammed her. Overall, it's important to remember that the new story about Nata being changed into the Lotus by the Orokin has come from a single source. I know that it is the new story, quote unquote, and it's what we get back from Lotus, but where does she hear this from? Where has she heard this story? We've never heard it before. It comes from Erra, who is essentially our enemy, who would do anything to destroy us and do anything to create a wedge between the Lotus and us. He's using her as a weapon, and he is the one that's perpetrated this story, and I simply do not trust him. The way he behaves around his sister seems very manipulative to me. He doesn't really care about her, he just wants to use her power to take back the Origin System. And so I think this is a convenient story that Erra has told, and we'll go into that a bit more when we talk about other aspects of my argument. But let's go on to point two. So for a moment, let's put aside both versions and we'll consider what actually happened, what we know actually happened at the end of the Old War. So the Sentients were ostensibly defeated, and then there was a big celebration ceremony where the Tenno then began their war against the Orokin. For no reason apparently, they just turned around and started attacking their masters, and eventually this would lead to the collapse, which was the destruction of Orokin society. Then the Lotus would sequester the Tenno away in the void, taking away Lua and the Tenno, and then the Grineer would destroy any remaining traces of Orokin society and build their own empire atop the ruins. So why, if this is the case, if Erra's story is true, that the Orokin reprogrammed Lotus and therefore the control over the Tenno, why did this happen? Erra claims that while the war was still raging, because we saw that this was during the height of the war when Erra confronts the Lotus, that the Orokin had taken control of Nata and reprogrammed her from the Lotus, so they had control of her. So they were in control of her programming and were using her to destroy the Sentients. All good for the Orokin. So why then did the Tenno suddenly turn against the Orokin and destroy them if they were in control of Nata? So this is a difficulty with Erra's narrative that he doesn't really explain to Nata or us as the players. Of course it is possible to explain this, but it's a little bit kind of janky in my opinion. It's possible that Nata was still in there somewhere and, a part of her came through and she destroyed the Orokin out of some moment of hate, or she broke through her programming to a degree, so she was half Lotus, half Nata. For me, this is again another purposeful flaw in the story that points to Erra's storyline being a lie. That the original story was in fact the truth, and she was originally programmed to destroy the Empire and the Tenno, but she held off on the latter because she did genuinely feel love for them, rather than it being this half-baked story that would fit in with Erra's narrative. However, there is yet another part of Erra's story that doesn't fit, and we'll go back to the Nata quest now. So, as a disclaimer, Nata is still one of my favourite quests in the whole game. It's so simply presented compared to the latter, more cinematic quests that we get now, but the cast of characters, including Tailrager of course, and the depth of lore is really hard to beat in my opinion, so I really still love this quest. So when I get into these discussions with other people, I feel that people don't really remember the Nata quest as well as they should, or pay much attention to it compared to some of the other quests. It isn't as flashy or dramatic as the second dream or the War Within, so maybe it doesn't stand out, but it really was a foundational piece of lore that we can't forget, and it set the stage for these new storylines that we're currently going through. So in the quest, during the final mission, HUNHOW addresses his daughter, Nata, many times, and lets it slip about how his daughter became the Lotus. It was his plan that she would become the Lotus, take control of the Tenno, and she would then destroy the Tenno. Any plan, or a sequence of events that HUNHOW calls the sequence.
We crossed the gap, wounds in ruin, to bring an end to this. We severed worlds, let them destroy me. Why is the sequence not complete?
So he says we let them destroy me, meaning that HUNHOW allowed Nata to take control of the Tenno as the Lotus, and even allowed the Tenno to destroy HUNHOW, so the Orokin would be lulled into a false sense of victory. So why then does Erra claim that the Orokin were using Lotus to destroy the sentients, having reprogrammed her, when HUNHOW in fact states that him being destroyed by Lotus and the Tenno was part of the plan, part of this sequence? So again, this just doesn't quite fit with the narrative that Erra is perpetrating, as we now have two members of the sentient leadership professing different views on what happened. As to why the Lotus was destroying the sentients. Was it part of the sequence, or wasn't it? Again, I think HUNHOW'S plan is the true story, and Erra's just invented a new narrative to drive a further wedge between us and the Lotus, so that she doubts that she ever loved us. So if Erra's story somehow becomes the new canon, and it did actually happen, I'm not sure how DE are going to explain this part of the lore away without it kind of being an uncomfortable fit, like, oh well, it was part of the plan, but then the Orokin, captured her halfway through the plan, so that's why, HUNHOW says that, because it's getting to really kind of uncomfortable territory, and it's almost like this bit of the lore has been forgotten. So this is again why I think that Erra is a liar, because we've already heard conflicting reports from his father, HUNHOW, who in my opinion is a little bit more reliable, albeit he is still a sentient. So there's one other aspect in conversation I want to talk about as evidence against Erra's narrative, and that is the conversation we get in the 2018 New War teaser trailer. So that's the one where Nata is on the ship conversing with what remains of her mother. In this trailer, the mother chastises Nata for being seduced by the Tenno who used them. So if the mother again is chastising Nata for having been seduced by the Tenno, i.e. falling to their charms and therefore becoming their mother figure rather than doing HUNHOW'S plan and destroying them, again, how does this make sense with Erra's dialogue that she was reprogrammed by the Orokin? If Erra's story was the truth, would the mother not feel the same as Erra does, that it's not her fault, but she was captured by the Orokin and was reprogrammed? Being reprogrammed by the Orokin isn't the same as being seduced. So again, I find this to be a little bit of a conflict, and is more in line with what we had before with HUNHOW'S versions of events rather than Erra's. So my next point relies on the fact of her actions during the Old War. So on Lua, the Lotus had her Tenno attack and wound Erra, yet he obviously survives as he is in the modern time. Again, Nata is confused about this. How did Erra get away? Erra expresses that she obviously doesn't remember what happened, so let's have a quick watch again and observe Erra's refusal to give her a straight answer when she questions him about his survival on Lua.
Lua, the Lotus, I attacked you.
You remember?
You died.
You don't remember everything then. Yes, your agents wounded me, and our forces were depleting fast. I knew I had failed. Failed you, my sister. Failed our family. I had no choice but to retreat.
No. You were destroyed. The Tenno made sure of that.
You're still recovering. With all that the Makers did to you, it will take time to heal.
He is one of them, isn't he? A Maker.
So again, I find him untrustworthy here. To me, it's that he doesn't want to tell her how he really survived, and that she has a gap in her knowledge. He's not really willing to give her the full story and be completely open with her. So why would that be? Why would he not just tell her the truth if he so often cares about her? he's quite often cagey with her. And why is that? Well, because I think he's manipulating her. And filling in the gaps and on my own speculation, what I guess is the following happened. At this point, she is still the sentient Nata, but she's undercover as the Lotus, and yes, she is starting to develop feelings for the Tenno, but it's still at the point in the old war where the plan or the sequence established by HUNHOW, where she is to wage war against the sentients. HUNHOW is still to be destroyed, because we do see him outside Lua, floating towards Lua, so we're still at that early point in the sequence where she has just gone undercover and HUNHOW is yet to be destroyed. So I speculate that to keep up appearances, she has the Tenno attack but not kill him, and then she would let him go out of sympathy for her brother, but she attacked him in the first place to keep up appearances, and maybe even, like, you know, whispers in his ear, like, it's part of the plan, shh, I'm undercover, get out of here. Erra would obviously be reticent to tell her this as to why he escaped, as again, it does go against his narrative that she has manufactured feelings for the Tenno, and that they were not genuine. So my final point is one I also made in my 2018 The Lotus did not use this video. That being that the Lotus will obviously need to come back for gameplay and pragmatic reasons. She is the mission guide, and so if she's actually a monster who hates us, would we really want to keep her as a simulated ghost as our guide? Surely we wouldn't want her arch enemy who actually hated us all this time as a constant reminder of her betrayal. But then what are we saying? Are we saying that DE will establish a new quote-unquote mission guide for people that have completed this part in the storyline? That pre-Apostasy Prologue, the earlier players will get the Lotus, and then later on as other players will get another one, like, you know, Teshin's been suggested, for exterminate and defense missions, etc. I highly doubt it. I've always seen this simulation as a stopgap, and that it'll always be Deaton's intentions to bring her back fully into the fold at some point, depending on where the story is. And really, DE doesn't have time to develop an entire new narrator or guide for the missions for later players. It really makes sense for them just to revert it back to the Lotus when the story reaches that point, so there is a chance for her redemption. So do you know what her perfect reason for redemption would be? Learning that Erra has in fact been manipulating her the whole time, and that her love for the Tenno wasn't a fabrication and in fact was genuine all along. That everything we went through and we did for each other was actually her choice. I believe there would be no stronger reason for us to reunite and join forces once again against the sentients. Ever since the Apostasy Prologue, she has had liars and manipulators whispering in her ears. First she had Ballas whispering in her ear, and now she has Erra, two of the most unreliable people that we've come across in the game. Both these characters are highly dubious actors, and in my opinion Nataz seemed very confused ever since the Apostasy Prologue, and would no doubt be easy to manipulate by these very bad actors. I feel like Ballas and Erra have manipulated her confusion. She's essentially a being who shares two personalities, one being the Lotus that she developed while undercover, and it is not surprising that she is confused as to who she is and who she actually wants to be. I also think this option for her redemption would be the most satisfying. Sure, we could have her reprogrammed again as we now have some Orokin friends in the Andrate, or we could have a version of her rescued from inside Nata and discard the Nata part, or we could have even a new version or a clone created. Yet none of these would redeem the choices she has made since becoming Nata again. It would just sidestep these difficult choices, and we would have a fake hollow version of our mentor to replace her, while we're meant to forget the betrayal and trauma that we've been through for the past couple of years. I don't think so. I would personally find this quite unsatisfying, and to be honest a little bit of responsibility shirking on behalf of writers when they could have had the chance to confront a controversial, flawed and difficult character who could ultimately be redeemed in an epic emotional reveal where it turns out that the real family she had are actually the ones manipulating her, and we are the true family that she never had. So thanks guys, that is my take on Erra, the big fat liar. Why I just don't trust him, and I really just want to stab the paracesis into his eyeless face. If you liked this video, please consider giving it a subscribe and a like, as I do Warframe content, such as my in-depth Grineer history video, which is a 40-minute long video of my take on the Grineer. But until next time guys, I will see you in the Proxima Vale. Take care.